Hello, and welcome to Informatically Speaking, a Greater Delaware Valley ANIA podcast designed to promote knowledge sharing in the field of nursing informatics, locally, nationally, and globally within our unique industry. At GDV ANIA, we are committed to providing opportunities for professional development with the goal of advancing nursing informatics practice. I'm your host, Constance McLaughlin.
Welcome back to our podcast series on applying the principles of influencing behavior within our personal and professional lives. We are, of course, spending time today with Bruce Wilson. Welcome back, Bruce.
Thank you, Constance.
And I think this is episode 8 of our series. We're coming down the home stretch.
Indeed,
we are.
What
are we talking about today?
Well, today, Constance, we have a two for one. As you know, we just finished up Source 2. And to kind of rewind our journey a little further, we are specifically in the last few sessions talking about the 6 sources of influence. And so we've moved through our model. We've looked at our clarified measurable results starting in podcast number 1. We've moved through finding vital behaviors, and now we're into source 3 and 4. And, the previous podcast took a deep dive on each source 1 and source 2. And in this podcast, we're going to do sources 3 and 4. So it's said differently to the model: social motivation and social ability. And we do this because the author, Vital Smarts or Crucial Learning now, represents it in this way. And so when we look at the model, this is the simplistic way that I define it. When we look at the social, which is the middle lane of the sources of influence, or if other people are involved in either influencing your behavior or, so let's say it differently, allowing your behavior or not allowing your behavior, if there's other humans involved, then you're dealing with this social layer. And so you have to have a way to classify that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And just to remind everybody, again, I previously mentioned this, but all of this content, it can be found on cruciallearning.com or in the Influencer book by Vital Smarts. And they have the full-on program there for folks to study further, if so inclined. Well, Constance, should we dive into source 3 and 4?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to start with social motivation. And the best way that I like to describe these two sources, social motivation and social ability, are really with what I call my bench press activity. Now, Constance, you may not know this about me, but I typically work out with my chest exercises. I do bench press, and typically I do about 400 pounds, maybe 450. I'm not kidding. I'm just kidding.
You can't even lift the bar with no weights on it.
Yeah, but let's imagine you and I are in a gym, and you're like, "Hey, Bruce, this is going to be a great workout. You can do this. Let's go." And I say, "Constance, man, that's a lot of weight." And you're like, "But Bruce, I think you can do it." Up until this point, you're really helping my behavior. So you're being what we would call a source 3. So you're motivating me to do the behavior. Now let's imagine in this story, I'm on the bench. I'm actually getting ready to lift the weight, and I start lifting. I get a few reps in, and you're like, "Yeah, Bruce, you're doing great. You're doing great." And you're like, "You can do one more." I'm like, "I don't know. You can do it." And you're cheering me on. And then all of a sudden, I'm bringing the bench press down. I'm bringing the bar down, and I get about halfway up, and I can't quite get it up. And I just need a little help. And so now what you do is you just slide your fingers underneath the bar just a little bit, and you help me lift that bar. You've gone from motivating me to actually giving me some additional ability. And so you've helped me finish lifting that bar. Another way to kind of take this same analogy, Constance, to the clinical informatics world is, there's a lot of times that we'll encourage folks of, you can use the EMR, you can use the technology. Oh, you know how to do social history, or you know how to do documentation, whatever it may be. And you may say that to him passing him in the hall or anything like that. But the minute that you are maybe at a workstation with them and you're talking to them about it and encouraging them to do it, but the minute that you actually point to this screen or put your hand on their hand and direct the mouse and say, click here, you've gone from social motivation to social ability. You've actually done the thing with them or for them. Said differently, they couldn't do it without you. And that's really the way we want to classify these two things. And you might think to yourself, well, that's kind of confusing. Why not just call it, social influence? And we really need to, again, break it down to, if we think back to, I'm going to test you, Constance. I always love to test you. When we think back to our one diagnostic question, we only ask one question only. Remember what it is?
Why are they doing what they're doing?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, excellent.
Why is this person doing what they're doing? And so when we are diagnosing why somebody's doing a certain behavior, we need to be able to classify with the other humans. Are they just, are they giving them the evil eye in the conference room? Are they, cheering them on at the water bottle, or at the I said water bottle, but
water cooler.
Water cooler. Thank you. Yes. At the water cooler, or are they actually helping them? Are they doing the work for them? Are they filling out the thing? Or and that's really important to know. So we're going to dive into a couple of key strategies here that really can simplify this whole process. And the two strategies I want folks to know are really one, what we call lead the way or set the example. And the second one is engage opinion leaders. And the first one we're going to talk about is leading the way. Constance, have you ever had to undergo any kind of change initiative in your organization? I know this is a loaded question, but just go with me here.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
And have you ever tried to lead the change yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, how committed have you been to the change?
So I am very committed to the change. It's trying to get other people to commit to the change.
Okay. And now I'm going to ask you a really tough question.
Yeah.
So you say you're committed. And I love this question because, Constance, most people are as committed as about a kamikaze pilot on his 39th mission, which that means they're not too committed. And so I'm going to ask you this. Think about what you did or what you said to demonstrate sacrifice as a commitment to the change.
Sacrifice as a commitment to the change. Well, I mean, this is work stuff here. So, I'm
Yep.
not throwing myself out of the airplane for sure.
Well, I know, but you probably, and see, this is the thing, we do these principles all the time, but we don't categorize them or classify them and realize that we're doing or using them as a tool. And that's really what I want our listeners to think about. So again, just simple question to you is, did you do or say anything that you would classify as a principle of sacrifice to show your commitment to the change?
Well, thinking back on it, I probably did not demonstrate something as fully because, when we're trying to get people to do this particular thing that I have in my brain, it really relies on their expertise and their commitment, not so much mine, but I'm offering my expertise and my experience in this. Yeah, so I probably could have done better.
Okay. Well, I'm going to allow you to give yourself a grade here. Let me give you a little bit of a framework to work with.
Okay.
My guess is hearing what you're saying. If I were to say, Constance, give me a grade right now, you'd probably say maybe a C. Now, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Constance, because we know that's not sanitary, but I would say you probably, I know, I got to get some laughs. But you'd probably give yourself an average grade. And I think you probably are doing more than you recognize. So apply this framework and then give me a new grade here in just a minute. And this is what we call the principle of sacrifice. So when we're dealing with other humans, we're trying to lead the way. This principle of sacrifice basically is something to show value that you value as a sacrifice. And this kind of sacrifice could be time, rearranging your priorities or your calendar, of course, money, but your ego, if you're like, hey, I know this isn't a big deal for me, but I realize it's a really big deal for you, or, however it may be. Empathy. So these are all principles of sacrifice. So now using that as a framework and thinking about how can I do those things when there's a change? Let's go back to the example you're thinking about in your mind and give me the grade again. And if your grade still comes up to be average, I want you now to take this framework and say, well, I could have applied and done some of the other things.
Well, I will say that probably a B plus or maybe even an A minus because
we're increasing.
yes, because my calendar has been consumed by this, my thoughts, my time, and completely. So there was a first pass at this, and then I completely changed the way that I was going about it.
Okay.
And represented and said, this is the thing, this is what I need from you. So completely changed my approach. So yeah, time, calendar, all of those things that you just talked about.
Yeah. And we often do that. And we just get lost a lot of times thinking that, oh, that's just the way it needs to be. And what we really need to do is take a step back. And it's okay to talk about your sacrifice. And we certainly want to show it. And it's okay to even bring it up and make it clear to others in a non-braggadocious or very humble way, if you will. And so that might sound like, hey, John Smith, I'm very committed to this change. I know that you're extremely busy. I'm extremely busy. In fact, if your calendar is anything like mine, there's not an inch or any spot of time free. But I have moved several things around because this is a priority and I'm here to support you for this change. Something along those lines to, again, demonstrate as a leader that it's not just lip service. We have to go do the change, that you're actually showing this principle of sacrifice or demonstrating this strategy of what we call lead the way. So that would be number one if we're trying to leverage social influence, specifically social ability or motivation. Number two is my favorite. And it's one probably that you're familiar with. So I'll ask you, are you at all familiar with the work of Everett Rogers?
The name does not ring a bell. No, can't say that it does.
So Everett Rogers, it had a treasure trove of studies. And he was a social psychologist. And he actually studied, I'd have to look up the number, but it's in the thousands. I want to say it's like well over 3,000, maybe significantly more than that. But he did studies on what actually drives change, and he specifically draws this notion of what we call the change curve. And according to Roger, change always follows this curve; it never deviates, and it's like an S. So it starts off at the bottom and then it's exponential. And then as it gets to the top, it kind of flattens out. For those listening and envisioning what this looks like. The sidebar, if anybody really wants to know more about this, you can read Everett Rogers' work, but you can also read a book by Jeffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm, where he further evolves Rogers' work into what some people know as the diffusion of innovation theory. And but the work in this opinion leader really is, as humans, and this is really fascinating. Rogers' work is very fascinating and groundbreaking with regard to change. Rogers says change always follows this curve, and this curve is broken into 5 segments. The first group is what he calls the innovators. And these are the folks, Constance, that you and I would see today at the iPhone store that sleep the night before the iPhone comes out to line up to get it. They're the first people through the door. And they're the first people in your organization to say, oh, I want to try the new thing. I want to try the new tech. I want to try fill in the blank. And if Rogers were here today, he would tell you, if you hitch your change initiative to them, it will die. He basically says, while they are innovative and neat and people like them, they'll never follow them.
Right.
The second group of folks that Rogers talks about is what we call the early adopters. And these are the folks that will wait until the innovators are through, and they are well liked within the organization. And there's enough people or the innovators that have gone through now. So you're kind of gaining a little bit of groundswell. But most importantly, they have what Rogers would call social capital. So they are, Constance, I'll kind of share my age with the audience. There's a commercial back in the day, and it's in the 70s and 80s. You can probably help me finish this sentence. For those listening, you might get a chuckle out of this. Commercial came out, and the commercial said, when E.F. Hutton talks,
People listen.
people listen. So yes, it's good to go back, isn't it? We remember those things, but that's exactly what Rogers would talk when fill in the blank talks, people listen. And these are the folks that you want to really elicit your help with. The third group Rogers talks about is the early majority. And the early majority will never come along. And this is, if you're looking at that S curve, it's really starting to get exponential at this point. Mm-hmm. That the early majority will never come along until the early adopters do. And he further goes on to say, then there's a late majority. And of course, those folks will never come along until the early majority do. And then lastly, the laggards. And we all know the laggards. We have what we call the squeaky wheel syndrome within an organization or a group of individuals. And Rogers would, again, to kind of circle back, he would say most people will start with the most vocal or the squeaky wheel. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. You want to go to that second group, the early adopters, and you want to find the folks that have a social capital. And if you do, you're going to inherit tremendous wealth with this change initiative you're trying to do. Well, that's great, Bruce. So we talked about Rogers, and he's always, said, hey, change always follows this curve, and it does. And so how do I find these early adopters? And then when I do find them, what do I do? What do I ask them? Well, Constance, I'm glad you asked that. So how do you find them? Whenever I go to an organization, I will actually go and do two things. I'll ask the leaders, the formal leaders, which are almost never the opinion leaders, but I'll ask them and I'll make a list. So just imagine left column, right column, and I'll make a list. So I have a list of the folks. And a lot of times they'll tell me the department leaders because there's this area of authority. But again, we're not talking about formal structure. We're talking about social capital. So then after I have the list from the leaders, which could be legitimate folks that there are opinion leaders, then I go out and I'll walk wherever. If it's in a hospital, I'll walk the floor. If it's in a clinic, I'll walk the clinic. But I go meet with the clinic and I talk about I ask simple questions like, who do you go to for help today? Who here knows most about your technology? Who here seems to be, the go-to person for the department? I'll ask these questions and I'll start compiling my right-hand column. And if I see that I have a match between those two, then I know I have a winner. But if I don't have any match, then I'm going to lean towards the right-hand column, assuming that most people will say that person's name over and over again. To kind of share a realistic story with you, remember my change challenge I've been talking about here with regard to the using the vitals link solution where we want to scan the badge, scan the wristband, and hit the send button so that the vital goes into the chart quickly. Yep. Well, this particular organization, we wanted to enlist the social capital amongst the nurses. And so I went around the floors and I started asking the nurses, and I specifically started it in the ED because that's where a lot of people come in, they want to use that solution, they need to use it. And I said, hey, and I started asking, who's the nurse here that everybody goes to for just general help? Who's the person that everybody goes to for technology help? And I started asking these questions, and it almost always came back to be the same person. Now I went around to other floors as well and asked the same questions. And you want to do that because you got to think about, from a change perspective, you want to think about geography, right? You can't just if this change is impacting multiple departments, you can't just go to one location and assume, oh, well, I'm one and done. And that's not quite how it works. Mm-hmm. You've got to meet the change in the local regions where the change is being impacted. And so now that's how you find them. And this is where most folks fall down with regard to Rogers' work and say, oh, I looked at that, but it didn't work. Don't leave it up to them to think about what to do. Said differently, once you find them, consider asking them to do things. Can you become a teacher for me? Can you become a coach for me? Can you make sure that you speak up during meetings? Can you provide feedback? Can you become an advocate? Be very specific about what you need them to do. Same scenario that I was talking about earlier. Same client, same vitals link, and we were trying to move the change through, and it started to get a little bumpy. But remember that the person that I talked to you about, she had said, hey, she was the head of surgery, said, hey, I'll help you all you need, but just don't ask me to type, right? This is when we were on the skill building piece. I knew that she had a ton of social capital. And so, but I, as a consultant, continuously got usurped in meetings when I was trying to bring things up. So I asked her very specifically, we're trying to move this through. Do you agree with the change? Yes, we do. We want to support that. Okay, great. During the next meeting with your constituents, which were other providers, I need you to do a favor. If I start being usurped and you agree with what we're trying to do, I need you to speak up and say that you're basically on board with it. So she did. So my question to you, Constance, maybe being in a similar situation is, what do you think happened when that happened?
Well, because she's a social influencer, they stopped butting up against you and let you finish. She probably said, look, this is what we need to do. This is the way we're going to move. And they agreed because she has that clout.
It was very similar to that, but it took a little bit of a different form. Full of conference room, full of providers and nurses, predominantly providers. She spoke up, but it was her speaking up that was the catalyst. They didn't immediately just abdicate to what she said, but her speaking up spawned another person to say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should. And then another person. And by the third person, we had a groundswell, and then everybody pivoted and capitulated.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the notion of identifying ahead of time who these folks are so that you can inherit their social capital or their wealth and use it to help influence the behavior you're trying to get.
I love that because, what was in my brain when you were asking me about change a few minutes ago, the scenario that I was giving you, which didn't give you much to go on, but that scenario that took my time and my calendar and my energy, I actually had someone in that very first meeting, which I realized at the end of the meeting that I needed to change my approach. She was the only person that spoke up in the meeting. And I thought, she's the person that I need on my side. So yes. In 2 weeks or so, I connected with her, said, I need your voice to help me push this over the line. I'm going to rethink it. Can we meet again? Can we this and that? And she's been along for the ride with me ever since.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm happy to hear that. I did something right. And I didn't even know I was doing it.
That's the best kind. Now, well, I'm not so sure about that. We actually want to be calculated here when we're using these tools, but nonetheless, good for you. But you're not off the hook that easy. So let's go back to your own personal influence challenge, because this is one where I might ask, we thought about in source number 2, which was personal ability. Was there any kind of skill building necessary for your influence challenge? We really decided not really, right? But for here, again, within your family, is there any way that you could apply social influence to your influence challenge?
So to remind everybody, my influence challenge was to enable and cheer on my son to clean up after himself and put his dishes in the dishwasher.
Yep.
And we've been talking about it every episode. So this one, actually, when we started talking about motivation and ability, you gave the example of lifting the weights. Yes. I immediately thought, because I knew you were going to ask me about this, but I immediately thought, what did I do? So what I did was the last time it was just, I don't know, a couple days ago, he picked up his dishes from the table, walked into the kitchen and placed them in the kitchen sink. And what he does is he places them, and I wish people could see me. You can see me. He kind of puts them in and looks at me as he's putting them in the sink. And he stops there for a minute and he looks at me to see if I'm going to say anything. So he knows that he should be opening that door and putting it in the dishwasher. So that's what he does. So I walked in there and I said to him, let me just ask you this question. No judgment. I just want an honest answer. Why do you put your dishes in the sink when the dishwasher is right there? Like it's right next to it. And he said, shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. That was his answer. So we talked about it, and here comes source 3 and 4. So I opened the door of the dishwasher for him.
Source
and
4.
I said, all you need to do is open the door. And he started, and he put his dishes right in the dishwasher. So I was ready for this question today.
You
Bruce.
were. You were. And, for those folks listening, just to really kind of dissect that a little bit, the moment he started looking at you in the sink, you could have given him the evil eye, or you could have given him the point to the dishwasher. Those would have all been examples of sources 3 and 4, and really more source 3, specifically if you gave him the evil eye and you pointed to it, to have him, to influence him to go ahead and open the door. The fact that you opened it for him, you moved into that, again, that source 4 realm. Yeah. But either way, and then also, if there's others in the house that maybe could also be, could be along, I don't want to say cheerleaders, but they could say, hey, I know this is the way that we want supposed to do it here. This is our dish mantra, this is how we do it. They can get along and help you. Again, there's power in numbers. And so they could be part of the process as well. So yeah, that's really it. That's sources 3 and 4 in a nutshell. It's not too, complicated or complex, but using those two strategies, leading the way and enlisting opinion leaders, are extremely useful tools when we're trying to utilize source 3 and 4.
Excellent. Before I let you go, yes, I do want to ask about the laggards. So when we talked about that bell curve with the early adopters and all that, and I'm sure everybody listening has seen that image. Yes. But what we were always taught, and I'm sure people would agree with me that are listening, that to bring in the laggards, to win over the laggards and have those people that are overly opinionated and don't like what's happening, if you win them over, they will be the biggest cheerleader. So what you were saying is to grab those early adopters. And I've had, if I could speak today, I've heard that before, is to grab those early adopters because they're the ones that will really help you take it over the edge because they have that social influence. But what about the laggards? Because they have that social influence too, but in a negative way.
I get this question all the time. And it's a little bit slippery. I'm going to say that. So what I'm trying to say is there's no hard and fast rule, but I'm going to tell you how I've done it. Okay. So there's this notion with regardless laggards or anybody, that if you don't include me, I'm going to feel relegated and less likely to be part of your change initiative. So therefore your mind says, well, I want to include them. So that's just one thing that's outside of Rogers. That's probably where you've always heard, like, include those. However, again, I'm going to talk out of my mouth and then I'll talk as if Rogers was here. If Rogers was here, he would say, don't focus on those folks because they have a higher likelihood of derailing what you're trying to do. And that, like a roller coaster, if we think of a roller coaster, in fact, last week I got to ride this amazing Velocicoaster at Universal Studios. It was so cool. But think of the roller coaster, right? If everybody that's going through the change is on the roller coaster, you're going to have the front of the car that the people are going through the change first. But eventually, as the car crests over the hill and starts to go down the hill, the laggards who are in the very back, everybody else that's in the car will pull them with them. So they'll come through. Now, will that always happen? Rogers would tell you no. but the likelihood is for the change of how those folks do it, they'll, in essence, I don't want to say give up. They'll come along with the change because everybody else is, and they don't want to miss out on the coaster. They want to have fun too.
Okay.
So that would be Roger's view. I will tell you, to even complicate it a little bit more for our listeners, I always try to determine, I use a tool, it's a stakeholder tool, and I want to know, does that person have power, urgency, and legitimacy? And if they have all three of those, then they're a definitive stakeholder. And if they are, regardless of whether or not they will derail it or go along, then I try to include them. If they don't have all three of those, maybe they have urgency, and they have legitimacy, right? But they have no power, then I'll just keep them informed. But if they have all three, that's the time when I use the exception to Roger's rule and I include them. That makes sense.
Gotcha. Yep, that does make sense. Very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, we'll conclude there and
Yes.
save the most exciting things for the next two sessions that we have for you. So, Bruce, thank you so much for your time, and can't wait till we reconvene with the last two sessions.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again for another session of Informatically Speaking.
This has been a production of the Greater Delaware Valley chapter of the American Nursing Informatics Association. For more information about the GDV ANIA chapter, visit us at community.ania.org/Greater Delaware Valley/home.